Okay. All right. I see your finger. I see your head. Hi. I think we're going to wait a couple of minutes, Dr. Guy McPherson, um, esteemed Dr. Guy McPherson, and I have some notes about you, but I think I'm going to let you tell some of that by yourself. But we are building an audience, and yes, it does take somebody's here, but it takes a couple of minutes. And so while we're waiting, I want to say I am absolutely thrilled that you're here with me. And so is Environmental Coffee House. We're trying to be something, a clearinghouse of everything under the umbrella of environmental and provide educational type of things under that whole umbrella. And we're doing really well. And having you here is an honor. And I would love for you to say hello to the audience, because we're building.
Thank you, Sandy. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
So, Dr. Guy, tell us a little bit about your background, but also I want to know how you actually got to where you are in the abrupt climate change arena. Your research that took you there, and then we'll go on from there, because I think the background is very important.
Yeah, I have an undergraduate degree in forestry from the University of Idaho. And when I was about ready to graduate from that esteemed institution, it occurred to me that I didn't have a job. And so this is October of 1982, and I'm going to graduate in December of 1982. And it occurs to me finally that, hey, I don't have anything to do as of when I graduate. In the College of Forestry building. It has changed its name since then. I think it's the College of Natural Resources. And I come across a little flyer that says something about going to graduate school. And I thought, hey, I never really thought about this. This is how little thought I put into my future when I was 22 years old. So I grabbed this flyer off the bulletin board and I take it to my advisor, Leon Neuenschwander. And I said, hey, Leon Neuenschwander, I've been thinking about, what it is I'm going to do after I'm done here in a couple of months. Do you think I should go to graduate school? And he calls on the phone his graduate advisor, Henry A. Wright, at that moment, and said, well, if you go to graduate school, you shouldn't go to this lesser institution. I'm not going to say what it was that I had the flyer that I pull off the bulletin board. He says you should work with the premier authority on fire. And
we may have a little technical stuff.
So I went to Texas Tech University. Yeah, I went to Texas Tech University, got my master's and PhD in range science. And along the way, I had interactions with lots and lots of graduate students, spent lots of time in the field with other graduate students. And we would talk about conservation biology. Conservation biology didn't exist really in the United States.
I didn't hear about it.
The journal Conservation Biology, produced by the Society for Conservation Biology, didn't even appear until 1989. So this was the early and mid 1980s we're talking about.
Yes, I know. I went to college then too.
And so then I went and got a postdoc at the University of Georgia, became increasingly interested in conservation biology. And next thing you know, I'm working at the University of Arizona in the School of Natural Resources. Oh, wow. Now it's called the School of Natural Resources and the Environment. And it wasn't long after that, I picked up a courtesy appointment in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. And increasingly, I'm teaching more about conservation biology. And finally, I'm teaching a course called Conservation Biology. Over that span of now we're talking nearly 30 years, I became increasingly an activist and a scholar interested in the pillars of conservation biology: extinction, speciation, and habitat. And so, too, understanding of what it takes for a species to persist on the planet and ultimately to the notion, since I'd been studying anthropogenic climate change this whole time since I was a master's student, it led me ultimately to this nexus of conservation biology and climate change, and ultimately abrupt climate change, leading to the concept of near-term human extinction.
God.
That was a rather long-winded response.
No, that was actually an excellent response. So then I suppose over time, because we've all gone through I have gone through the 80s with you and the 90s and all the things you did, developed your theory, and you've been watching our climate change. And, so many of us were understanding of it, but we were a little bit asleep at the wheel, so to speak. I guess what I want to do next is, you gave us your background. I would like to talk a little about abrupt climate change. Some of those things in that realm, such as carbon, CO2, methane up in the Arctic, the usual things, but with your spin about where they're taking us.
We were warned in 1988 by James Hansen, who was speaking on the floor of the United States Congress. And he said in 1988, so this is nearly 30 years ago, 29 years ago, James Hansen says 350 parts per million is the absolute upper limit for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere before we're in real trouble. And of course, he also pointed out that 320 parts per million or even 300 parts per million would be a lot safer. We're interested in the precautionary principle. We should scale back to a much lower number than 350, which he pointed out was dangerous. Well, now we're at more than 400 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the feedback loops, the self-reinforcing feedback loops that he warned about in his 2007 book, Storms of My Grandchildren, it's obvious that many of those self-reinforcing feedback loops have kicked in. And in particular, the clathrate gun that he warned about from the relatively shallow seafloor of the Arctic Ocean. Well, methane is now at about 250% of what it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, nearly 2,000 parts per billion on a regular basis. That's a huge number, considering we're at about 750 parts per billion at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, about 1750.
Okay.
So just those two greenhouse gases combined, carbon dioxide and methane, lead to a carbon dioxide equivalent in the atmosphere of more than 600 parts per million CO2. And there's 41 more. There's 41 more.
And we're
putting these greenhouse gases, including water vapor, including nitrous oxide, including chlorofluorocarbon, and then the list goes on and on and on.
Wow. Chlorofluorocarbon. Just give me that explanation of what is chlorofluorocarbon again. I've been reading about aerosols and the clouds, and let's get a little definition of that one.
Yeah.
Thank you. You got it? Could you hear me?
I could hear most of that, yes.
Oh, okay. Give us a little explanation of hydrochloro, those types of where they come from. Where do these things come from?
Okay. Chlorofluorocarbons, commonly known as CFCs, are something we have known about for more than 30 years as a nasty thing to have in our environment. Like most of the greenhouse gases, chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, result from industrial activity of various kinds. So in this case, in the form of refrigerants. So we've known about the increasing size of the hole, the so-called hole in the ozone over Antarctica. Since the Reagan administration. And that's when we actively took action against refrigerants being in the atmosphere. So but of course it takes a long time from the decision to say hey, we don't want that in the atmosphere until it's all gone from the atmosphere. That doesn't happen the next day. It's not like a stop sign and you're driving and you have plenty of warning and we need to stop right there at that intersection. That's not the case. There's a lot of lag in the system. So, for example, the maximum heating associated with carbon dioxide occurs about 10 years after the carbon dioxide. We haven't even realized yet the impact of 410 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, not the full impact. That takes 10 years to be manifest. So we look out 10 years from now and we've locked in at least another 1 degree Celsius global average temperature rise just from carbon dioxide alone a decade from now.
Okay,
we aren't stopping.
I know we're not stopping.
We aren't stopping putting carbon dioxide.
That's where I want to get to. Because you talk about we're not stopping. And we have any number of ways to get all this into the atmosphere, which I'm sure we all know. Where are you saying? Tell us. Where are you saying this is going to lead if we don't clean up our act? Because you are one of those controversial figures that says it's pretty quick.
Yeah. I've added up the feedbacks, the self-reinforcing feedback loops, yes, and concluded that we're headed for a global average temperature at or very near the highest temperature experienced by this planet in the last 2 billion years within the next 9 years. 9 years.
You say it's 9 years.
And,
okay.
And I don't see any way for humans to survive that. That's based on an analysis conducted by Sam Carana in July of 2016, and then my own assessment of that, which I posted on my blog, McPherson.com, on August 1st of 2016. Just to add up a few of these self-reinforcing feedback loops. For example, the loss of Arctic ice, the water vapor in the atmosphere, and then the absence of global dimming from the aerosols falling out when industrial civilization meets its overdue end. And suddenly we're at least 22 and probably closer to 23 degrees Celsius global average temperature by, say, mid-2026. And I don't see any way for complex organisms, multicellular organisms that depend upon myriad other organisms for our existence, like Homo sapiens, to survive such a rapid rise in temperature in such a short period of time. I just don't see us surviving that.
Even with the mitigation technology that people are coming up with, and I listened to Paul Beckwith, and he was talking about the putting a solution into jet fuel and seeding the clouds. And how about a little bit about that? Because I was trying to understand it, and I don't know, I guess it was maybe sulfur dioxide. And then as the plane burns the fuel, there would be sulfur added to the lower stratosphere, and it would reflect sunlight off the clouds. Now, these are my notes, and I was trying to understand how this would work, and I guess it goes into that whole geoengineering thing, but I'm really interested in this. So if you don't mind, let's go there.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. One, civilization is a heat engine, as pointed out by Tim Garrett's work on thermodynamics. Tim Garrett is a atmospheric scientist who has been working for years at the University of Utah. And he first wrote about civilization as a heat engine based on thermodynamics alone in 2007. So we've known for quite a while that maintaining this set of living arrangements that we call civilization, that means going to the grocery store and getting food and having water coming out the municipal taps and having petroleum products available for us to burn at a moment's notice. All that means that no matter how we power civilization, whether it's solar panels and wind turbines, or whether it's based on fossil fuels, and all those panels come from somewhere, and most notably they come from the development of fossil fuels. civilization itself is a heat engine. So that's the first thing to remember. So the so-called solutions rooted in keeping civilization going are not really solutions, because they just mean the 200 species a day we're driving to extinction. They just maintain the eroding of the soil and the fouling of the air and the dirtying of the water and all those other things, including the heat engine that we have turned planet Earth into. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is Paul Beckwith is not a legitimate authority when it comes to talking about climate change. He has published not a single paper dealing with climate change or conservation biology. He's a laser physicist who has worked on other topics and who last published a paper in the Referee Journal of Literature in the early 1990s. So we're a little behind the times, and depending upon fantasy technology, if we turn to those kinds of quote solutions to save ourselves.
Well, could not one learn an awful lot on their own, even, but being that he is in the University of Ottawa, I'm not involved in anything. Of course. Saying that. I look at it. I look at a lot of things. He's not the only one I read. I mean, and I am learning. I'm learning. I mean, I know so much more than I did, but am I an expert? No, not at all. But I do want to ask a question, because this is live. We have Fred Sinclair, who is online, and I work with Fred in a local organization in where we live, and we do a lot of local activism, and we're like the environmental watchdogs of our little county down here in Western New York. And Fred is asking, we've been discussing this, are chemtrails real? I mean, do we want to go here? Maybe, yeah, just a little bit from your perspective, because you're the one. I've got you, and we're going to ask you.
Sure. Okay. So, I've never promoted inaction in response to the situation we're in. So don't get me wrong. However, the United States National Academy of Sciences and a European body of similar stature in 2015, 2 years ago, concluded that geoengineering will fail, concluded that there is no evidence to support the notion of geoengineering as any kind of solution. And in fact, both of those bodies concluded that we might actually make the situation worse by attempting to geoengineer the planet. So, these are esteemed and very conservative bodies. Not a single member of either of those bodies is interested in civilization collapsing, much less in the extinction of our species. I can assure you, if it seemed that there were a way out, those two bodies would have come up with and at least considered the ways out, and probably even promoted them. And they both concluded that geoengineering is a bad idea. With respect to chemtrails, I've written a little bit about that. I don't see any evidence for large-scale entities, corporations, governments, whatever, putting reflective particles into jet fuel to try to either kill us all or save us all. And those are the two common reasons I hear for chemtrails being conducted, being put up into the atmosphere.
The people, and I'm going to say, I really don't have a lot of background on that at all. There is a website. I try to look up and think about this, who would be doing it? I would not know. Would it be NASA? Would it be the government? You're saying corporations, there's no impetus for them to do it. Why would they do it? And I'm looking at, is it seeding the clouds? Is that what we're being told by those, those people that are propping up the whole geoengineering argument? I've heard it from a lot of different sources. So you're saying there's absolutely no incentive to do that for the government?
Well, cloud seeding is widely written about and has been widely practiced. That's completely different than what I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you.
With chemtrails. So cloud seeding, fine. People do that all the time. They try to cause precipitation in a certain area. Because the atmosphere reaches equilibrium relatively quickly, it's pretty obvious that if it rains in one place, it doesn't rain in another place. So those activities have been demonstrated to cause the redistribution of rainfall around the planet, but not necessarily to increase the rainfall around the planet. It can increase it locally for sure. And also with respect to geoengineering itself, we've been geoengineering for a long time, since we turned the first shovel full of dirt over and released carbon dioxide and methane. Certainly from the time we began burning fossil fuels for heat, for energy, to warm ourselves, to drive our cars, to provide all those conveniences. All those are geoengineering. They are activities that, when we put together billions of people doing them, great potential to change the atmosphere. There's no question about that.
Of course, we see it, we know it. So it's then, is it too little, too late? I have Roger up here who asked a question about this. Roger's my partner, and we're asking, is it too late if we got a mindset where we could get off fossil fuels in the next, they give out years, 30, 50, I read you because you're controversial too, and you're saying 10 years. Give us that view of where you think we're going, and is it not feasible? Is it too little, too late, like the Paris Agreement?
It's too little, too late, and the Paris Agreement is a classic example of that. It was October of 1990, the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases concluded that 1 degree C is the absolute upper limit above the 1750 baseline that we could go without triggering these self-reinforcing feedback loops. So for a while there, 1 degree Celsius was the limit. That was the target that we could not exceed. We're well beyond that now. We're at least 1.6 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline. And so what have we done in response? Well, the United Nations has shifted the baseline. It's no longer 1, it's 2. And 2 is impossible to achieve. And we'll be there very, very quickly, I can assure you. The self-reinforcing feedback loops have already kicked into play. It's pretty obvious that 0.5 degree C was a more reasonable target, and we eclipsed that more than 30 years ago. So, yes, it's too late. We have triggered events. Noel Brown, the New York director of the United Nations Environment Program, said, and this is quoted by the Associated Press, and therefore in most newspapers around the country. He said this in late June 1989. He said, we have 10 years left to solve this carbon dioxide problem before things spin out of human control. So we had until 1999. Whoops, that was about 18 years ago, and we didn't solve anything. We only made it worse in the ensuing 28 years since Noel Brown made that statement on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program. So we haven't solved anything. We've made the situation worse. Every year is hotter than the previous year. That's been the case for the last 3 years.
Yeah,
I know.
I felt it.
We aren't doing anything. Well, I mean, what is it people think that they're doing by pointing to contrails in the sky to blame somebody else? What is it we think we're doing when we recycle more but don't change the underlying human behavior? And we haven't. And there's now more than twice as many people on the planet as there were when I showed up.
You know what, Guy? I can actually say I completely agree with human behavior not being changed, or not by enough of us. I mean, there are those of us like me who are recycling nuts and who moved to the country to get away from everything. I live, in Amish country. I would love to be like them. But I personally, and a lot of my followers, our followers are out there, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to do it regardless, because it is the only way to get through the day, and we are on the right side of history here. We're on the right side.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I threw everything at this. I left active service at the university. I left a 6-figure job where I wasn't expected to do anything, including show up to work. I was banned from teaching in my home department. I wasn't even expected to show up every day because I was promoting ridiculous concepts like anarchism, like taking responsibility for yourself, like pointing out that there are dangers associated with the way we live, that there's a downside too. And so I left active service at a major research institution where I was paid a lot of money to not really do anything in 2009. And what did I do? I went to a homestead that was all off-grid, that still is all off-grid, that has 2 solar pumps and a hand pump, that has a 3.15 kilowatt solar array, that has a straw bale house, where I planted an enormous number of trees and extensive gardens where I raised goats and chickens and ducks and a goose named Myrtle and some turkeys too.
A goose named Myrtle.
I was all in. I was all in. And so I took what I believed were reasonable actions in response to the threat posed by climate change. And essentially nobody followed that lead. And it didn't make any difference. And I realized now that it couldn't make any difference for a couple of reasons. One, it was too little too late. And 2, nobody's interested. I mean, there's a very small number of people who are going to increase their recycling efforts in the midst of a crisis, much less give up every bit of money that they're making or will ever make.
Well,
give up every relationship that they ever had in their lives. And these are the prices I paid.
Yeah, you paid them. I would imagine, because you had to leave something that most people, I have to say, in the academic arena, don't leave until they're 90. I know I worked it, and I also left early, which was surprising. But when you say, this whole behavior thing really fascinates me, because I also feel that people just don't change. I know plenty of people that have an attitude like that of, I don't recycle, or why should I do that? Or why are you doing that? You're crazy. Now, either they know something I don't know, or it's just like the underlying behavior. We never got through to them. So the whole thing that you were doing, everything you were doing has hit a small segment of society, and people are not changing fast enough to stop the behaviors, correct? Because also somebody asked me about plastic garbage and all that, and they kind of wanted me to ask you, and I don't know if you know this, how much plastic is actually manufactured, right? And does all that pollution, manufactured plastic made from oil, does that actually contribute towards this climate change, towards this extinction, so to speak, all of that stuff? Do you have an idea about that?
Where does plastic come from?
Yeah, where does it come from?
Where does plastic come from? It comes from oil. So we extract oil from the ground, and that produces heat all by itself. And then we transform it into plastics. I think of that film, The Graduate, and the old accomplished businessman turning to Dustin Hoffman, who was young at the time The Graduate was made. And he says, the future, son, plastics. Plastics are the future.
We are the same age.
That's what we did.
Yes. No. That's what we did. It's not
right
funny.
Now, the Pacific Gyre is an enormous patch of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. It's bigger than the state of Texas.
God, that's amazing.
And according to the book A World Without Us by Alan Weisman, published now must be nearly a decade ago.
World Without Us? Okay.
Yeah. More than half of the grains of sand you see on many of the world's beaches aren't sand at all. They're little tiny pieces of plastic.
Oh my God.
They just look like sand. So have we made a difference with plastic? Yeah, I'd say we have. Rather significant difference at that.
It'll never go away. I mean, I'm gotten to the point where I think about the toothpaste tube, even if I use Tom's natural toothpaste. I mean, it's crazy. I think about all this stuff, and there's not a goddamn thing I can do, is there? But hopium.
Well,
there's a lot of people that don't like the word hopium. Okay,
wait. There is something you can do.
Okay,
There are
good.
many things we can do, right? We can do all these things. Instead of focusing on recycling, let's look at the other two that we heard about when we were kids. Reduce, reuse. If we just do those two, we don't even have to worry about recycling because we got rid of 90% of the problem right there.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So if we reduce and reuse and recycle, and we use less, and we consume less, and we produce fewer people on the planet, and we take all these right actions, here's what we can do, Sandy. Here's what we can do at the end of the day. We can look ourselves in the mirror and we can say, I didn't make it worse today.
I like that. See, we all want to hear that positive message that gives us the reason to go on and fight for all that we're fighting for. I mean, people are fighting for everything, civil rights and employee rights and all of that, and we're going to continue to do it. We're human beings. We are here. And so, if people want to adopt the message of cleaning the environment, it would just be a wonderful thing. I'm just hoping we can. I'm hoping we can keep doing it by being positive. Now, I know you also talk about very positive things. You talk about making peace and loving those you're with. And I'd like to hear about that part of your heart and your positive outlook.
So before I even go there, a couple of things. I have never promoted inaction. I have, for a very long time, promoted taking the right action and not being attached to the outcome. Because as those of us know who grew up at the tail end of the American Cultural Revolution that failed, as those of us know who were fighting for civil rights, for social justice, for environmental protection, as those of us know who have been doing those things for a very long time, it hasn't quite worked out the way we planned, has it? But still, there are some days when we get to go home at the end of the day and report to the most important person in our lives that I didn't do so bad today. And the most important person in our lives, the person we look in the mirror. That's the only person we have to report to. There's no other boss for us except us and what's going on in our head and in our heart. And so if we continue to grind the living planet into dust as individuals and a society, can we look ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day and say, yay, awesome day. I made more money today than I ever have. No, I don't think so. I don't think most people listening to this program are interested in that sort of approach. I think instead that they are interested in the approach that says, at the end of the day, can I look myself in the mirror with a conscience and say, not bad today. So, there's all that.
I do that every day. I know that I've done something good every day, and so have the people that follow us, and so have a wide variety, and I hope it can proliferate. I hope it can proliferate, doing these good things to make ourselves feel good so that what we're looking at is not as frightening and not as scary because we have a daily, beautiful life to live and turn around the negativity that's happening somehow. I would think.
And this is what we have. Right? This is what we have is today. This is what we have is now. So can we try to make the world a better place? Yeah. Should we? Yeah. I'm a huge fan of all of that. Will it make a difference? It would surprise me. But but you don't know unless you try it, and you can't serve that most important master yourself if you haven't tried, if you haven't given it a shot. So again, remaining unattached to the outcome is important here, because if you're too attached to the outcome and the outcome just gets worse every single day despite your best efforts, you might end up despairing. You might end up concluding that your efforts have been for naught, and therefore you're not going to do anything anymore. And so I don't think that's a reasonable approach at all. I think being unattached to the outcome is probably a good idea. And just living with the now, and with the fact that you can at least report to the person in the mirror and maybe to to the rest of humanity that you're doing what you think is the right thing instead of grubbing for a few dollars more.
Well, Guy, I have a question or a comment from one of our viewers, Cristobal, and says, but wouldn't we look bad if by 2030 there's no evidence for the extreme scenarios that we are pointing out here? That's from Cristobal.
Wouldn't we look bad?
Well, this is her comment. I think what she's saying is that what happens if, wouldn't the people that are predicting the negative outcome for the species, so to speak, what happens if it doesn't happen? Then all of wouldn't you look bad? That's what I'm thinking she's meaning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, wouldn't that be horrible if we didn't go extinct? No, I think that would be a great idea. And what I'm pointing out with my message is that I encourage people to take right action. I don't encourage people to take no action. I have never promoted the idea of inaction in response to this predicament. Mm-hmm. Instead, I have promoted the ideas of doing what you love and loving what you do and pursuing excellence in this culture of mediocrity. And if this forecast, which is based on the most conservative science I've been able to find, if this forecast turns out to be incorrect, I will revel. Trust me, there's nobody more than me who wants to be wrong about this. Do you think I want everybody to die? No. I have a list, but it doesn't include everybody. It doesn't include me. It doesn't include you.
That's see, I knew that was in there, but we wanted to ask it. I guess people are pretty excited about all this. Let's change it up a little bit. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
One more comment, if I can.
Yeah.
I'd say at this point there's a 95% chance that we will have an ice-free Arctic this year. No ice in the Arctic Ocean. In fact, the latest projections indicate that we will have an ice-free Arctic somewhere between the first week of July and the first week of August. The melt season reaches its apex in late September, approximately September 20th. And it looks like we're headed for an ice-free Arctic a month or 2 months or more before then. That has never happened with humans on the planet. You think the methane is spewing out of the Arctic Ocean now. Just wait till there's no ice cap on top of it. We haven't had an ice-free Arctic for 3 million years. Homo sapiens has been on the planet about 200,000 years. So about 7% of the time since we've last had an ice-free Arctic. This is absolutely huge, and almost nobody knows about it because
that's
it's not
why you're here. Teach one, reach one. We have to do this, and each one has a responsibility to change themselves.
And this was forecast. This was predicted by the U.S. Naval Postgraduate College. In 2013, they did an analysis predicting an ice-free Arctic in 2016, plus or minus 3 years. I'd say we dodged a bullet for 4 years already, but there's no way that we avoid an ice-free Arctic in the near future. Will it happen this year? I think there's a really, really, really high probability of it, if not this year, then next.
Okay.
And that's absolutely huge and unappreciated. And I mean appreciated not in the usual sense. It's unknown and not the magnitude of the impact from that event alone is absolutely huge in terms of albedo or reflectance of incoming sunlight onto the polar ice, instead being absorbed by the blue ocean. And then the methane release from the Arctic Ocean that will result from an ice-free Arctic is absolutely enormous, the likes of which we've never experienced as beings on this planet. So this is absolutely dire.
It may be dire, okay, and people now are going to know, but the message has to be like we talked about before. It's going to happen, but it's what we do on a daily basis. And hopium, which is, I know a lot of people don't like the word, hope, but there's a lot of hope. We work every day at it, no matter how lousy we see this future. Every day at it. Let's see. I think there are some other people that might want to give you a couple of comments here. This has been fascinating. Actually, let me see. Here's a good one. I wrote this down and I was thinking about this. Guy, how do you respond? How do you respond to people, that challenge you? Because we already had a little bit of it. But how do you respond when, especially like in an audience, you ever get hecklers? Do you ever get people that are just downright nasty or ignorant? Does that happen ever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in audiences, although not nearly so much in audiences because their people have to show themselves. And most people would be embarrassed to act in such an uncivil manner. And, like with any church, the choir is who shows up largely when I go on tour, when I speak. It's mostly the people who have at some level accepted the notion that climate change is real, is anthropogenic in origin, and so on. So those are people who show up. Now, I still get death threats. I still get hate mail every day. So,
wow.
There's a lot of pushback from people who don't really appreciate what I have to say. And I can understand that. This is not a lot. This is not fun and games.
No, it's not.
This is
frightening, and people are in denial.
Right. This is not my message of go out and party like it's 1999. My message is we might not have until 1999. Okay, at least 2099.
Yeah.
So we should live in light of that information. I advise people to pursue excellence, to pursue love in their lives, to remain calm because nothing is under control, at least not under our control. I think President Obama was one of the luckiest people on the planet because there was a pretty good chance that the Icefree Arctic would have happened in his administration, and therefore he would have got blamed for it. But the lag between carbon dioxide emissions, methane release, and the loss of that ice in the Arctic Ocean is so long that instead Donald Trump is inheriting this mess from a whole bunch of history. So
and has completely no idea what to do with the mess, and then hires and brings on the absolute worst people to handle it. People that will just hasten it. Actually, in my opinion, they're hastening it.
Absolutely, but it's irrelevant. At some level, because he didn't inherit this mess.
Okay.
Because by the time he was inaugurated into office, the train had already fallen off the trestle. It hadn't just left the station. Mm-hmm. It had left the station 28 years earlier and had fallen off the trestle. And people were arguing about what seat they would get on the way down before the train hit the canyon in the bottom. So Donald Trump inherited a huge mess. Is he making anything better? No, of course not. I mean, as nearly as I can tell with his every action, he is attempting to make everything worse. But
worse.
But
insane.
It was horrible. He was elected into the La Brea tar pit. Our entire society was neck deep, and he got elected, and that allowed us to point at Donald Trump and say, "Hey, look, it's his fault." No, it's not his fault. It's our collective fault.
I never say it's his fault. I never say. Personally, on my channel, I talk about that he's hastening it, that he's not doing anything to help it, that him and his administration have no understanding of anything you are saying. Absolutely nothing. I doubt. And if they did, they would have blind and deaf to it because they are greedy. And these people are driven by consumerism and capitalist tendencies. And that's another problem.
And apparently so is everybody else in the society that I've come across in my lifetime of living in the United States anyway. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody's chasing the same dollar. Everybody's pushing grandma out of the way so they can get the last Xbox on the shelf so they can give it to their grandkid. It's absolutely insane. And so we constantly are pointing fingers at the behavior of other people, most notably including our elected political leaders who, we actually elected, and blaming them for looking a lot like us.
Okay, given that, blaming and discussing and these situations, how did it happen then? How did we get here? Who do you blame? Who do the millennials look at and say, oh my God, I'm awake and I'm 25, I'm 29, and look what's happening. How did this happen? What do we do? What do we do, Guy? Where do we go from there?
Blame. No blame, no shame, no guilt.
Okay.
Only love remains. We got to stop dumping it on the millennials. College professors all over the world are telling millennials, you got to fix this. Yeah, you inherited a hell of a mess from us, but you have to fix it. And how unfair is that?
Very unfair. I have one.
It's horrible. It's heartbreaking. So one of my friends from Western Australia, 25-year-old Serena, who will appear regularly and has appeared in the last couple of episodes of Nature Past Last Radio.
We're going to talk about that next.
She came home one day and her roommate was awash in tears and blood because she had come from her university classes where she was told again that by a baby boomer, by somebody who looks a lot like me, that we made this mess and she's going to have to clean it up. And she knows it's a lie. She knows there's no cleaning it up. And even if she could clean it up, what the hell is she supposed to do? She's 20. At the time, she's 22 years old. She's supposed to fix a mess that was created by 250 years of Americans pursuing the next dollar. Come on. Let's not dump it on them. Let's take a little responsibility.
So we have time because we're living longer, you say, or in this age of, like my age, your age, we take more responsibility. We step up to the plate and say, okay, we've somewhat been responsible. We better clean it up or do something for them to make it more habitable and happy.
Well,
happy for them.
Again, we can take actions instead of pushing the blame on somebody else.
Yeah, that does nothing.
I suspect it's way too late for those actions to make any positive difference. But what we've got to stop doing is blaming and shaming and guilting other people for the things that we have done. So, I mean, these self-reinforcing feedback loops, we don't know about them until we ran over the dog with the car, right? We only know about them in the rearview mirror. Yes. Oh, look at that. That was a dog. I heard that bumping noise. Oh, that's bad. Well, the dog is dead.
What an analogy.
All the horrible stuff is behind us. How do we live going forward? Because we already did that. That's in our past. We can live for today. But blaming and shaming and guilting and expecting somebody else to clean up the mess, that's all ridiculous.
Okay. Well, I do have a comment that is up on the board about it is the elected officials through his, who've been responsible somewhat. I mean, elected officials.
Really? Who elected them?
We did, supposedly.
Oh,
supposedly
really?
We did, yes.
Oh, so
supposedly
we elected them,
we did.
But it's their... So we elected them. We let them remain in office to do their dire deeds. We looked the other way because we were benefiting, because we turn the lights on. We flip a switch and the light comes on. We flip a faucet and the water comes out. We go to the grocery store and there's lots of food.
And we've been used to that.
So it's not our fault. It's the politicians' fault for killing all those brown children in the Middle East and Northern Africa to get the oil so that we can continue living large.
We all are complicit, Guy. We all are. We're all complicit in this whole thing, every single one of us, because we know, or those of us that are enlightened, we know. We do exactly what you say. We get in the car, we go to the gas station. We were all complicit for Standing Rock and what happened at DAPL, because nobody made a change in their lives in the 80s when it started, 90s, when we had to. That's kind of how I feel. It's anger, though.
And yet, we were born into the set of living arrangements. You and I didn't have a hell of a lot of choice, did we? We didn't get to vote on when we were born, and we just did what was expected of us the whole time we were growing up and going to school and going to more school and getting jobs and saving for retirement and all that. That's all part of the social construct known as civilization.
Yep.
And to even react against that, to even say we're not going to do that, gets one cast out from the society. So it takes a pretty intellectually tough person to do that.
Very.
Today, much less 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And so, of course, when you continue down the road you're on, you're going to end up where you're headed at some point. And what do you know? We're there.
We're there.
And so it's this combination of things. It's this combination of things of us being born into the set of living arrangements. The notion that blame and shame and certainly blaming the people we elect to represent us. All of that combines to tell me that we need to live now, live in the present, and treat people with respect and with love and with decency, and not get all hung up on blaming and shaming and watching the mainstream media point fingers at each other. What good is that? What is the point of that whole exercise?
What is the point? But what is the point of that in any of it? It's not just the mainstream media. It happens on alternative media as well. And I don't know. I think that's a human trait of doing it. And I would like to see us change. I mean, that's a whole psychological construct we're talking, but we don't have enough time to do that. So I'm going to segue.
Right.
I want to segue, and I want to hear about nature bats last. Let's talk about that. Let's segue, because talking about human behavior, sometimes I can't do it because I could do it for a long time. Go for it.
Well, Nature Bats Last is my blog, McPherson.com. It's also a radio show on the Progressive Radio Network that airs the first Tuesday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And I have a new co-host for the radio show. Mike Sleva has bailed out after 105 episodes.
Wow.
Independent Canadian journalist Corey Morningstar will be co-hosting with me from here on out. And our Australian correspondent, Serena Raphael, will be joining us each episode as well.
Terrific. So, all right.
Changes as we move on. And so I post a lot of information at the blog at guymcpherson.com, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. I posted each of the last 4 days because it's becoming apparent with people like you that my message is spreading. And so there's more people interested and more people willing to host me on the air in various forms. So all that information ultimately ends up at the blog at Nature Bats Last. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I wanted to know, because I'm going to tell you, at this channel with my little team that we have Cindy in Texas and Roger in New York, and I'm in Western New York, and we have George in New Jersey, and we have a new person named Splatterhead Jones, who I actually met through Hambone's channel. He's going to do video editing for us and now put it on the YouTube. But as I say, I'm not afraid of controversy. I'm not going to back down from bringing controversial figures into an interview situation. That's how I had Hambone on here, and let me tell you, you can't get any more controversial than he is. And I'm looking to have climate deniers. I want to have, and I said, clearinghouse and education under the whole umbrella. I think having somebody that completely is the arch opposite of you would be very interesting. Very interesting. Wow. I think what we're going to do is I'm going to look for a few questions. We're approaching the hour marks shortly. I want to see if anybody out there, and thank you for all being here. This has been fantastic. Let's talk. Are there more things you want to know? Bring it up, guys. Let's see. I've had some good ones, Guy, but I'm going back a little bit. I think one comment was individual change is not enough. That was the point of the person's comment. Oh, we need political action. Okay. And political action is what's going to get us to where we need to be, at least with those things we discussed. Changing personal habits. Correct? What do you think?
I think civilization is a heat engine. I think there's abundant evidence to support that conclusion now, rooted in the very conservative research literature. Civilization is a heat engine. Politics is just another part of that heat engine. So I mentioned anarchism before. Anarchism means taking responsibility for yourself. And anarchism is the way we lived for the first 2.8 million years of the genus Homo on the planet. Yeah. So let's do that. Let's take responsibility for ourselves and not count on somebody else, not count on some institution to be the nanny state, to take care of us. not put the blame or the action on them. Let's take actions in our daily lives that will make a difference.
Locally, too.
I stopped counting on politicians to fix anything in approximately 1973. And I was 13 years old. You know, and
that's quite a while.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Do you really expect, all the words that came out of Barack Obama's mouth were matched by actions that were exactly the opposite of those words that came out of his mouth? Remember his campaign promise to shut down Guantanamo Bay? Oh, yeah. We didn't make much progress there, did we? Remember his campaign promise to tackle climate change and do something about it? Well, we know, and he has known for essentially his entire administration, that to do that, we have to terminate civilization. Do you think he's a fan of that? Do you think anybody posting comments right now calling for political action is interested in shutting off the omnicidal heat engine to which we affectionately refer as civilization? I think not. I think these people are interested in somebody else solving the problem for them. I think that's nanny statism. Let's take responsibility for ourselves.
Nanny statism.
Not expect somebody else to do it.
Is that a Guy McPherson? Is that you? Nanny statism, or is that something wider? Because I haven't heard that term.
That's the first time I've heard it myself.
Oh, really? Okay. We got a new one, guys. Nanny statism. We have coined it today. Somebody better write it down because I forget. Well, I'm going to give you.
It's going to appear in next year's Merriam-Webster.
No, I don't think so, but I like it. It's good. Okay, well, we really basically have just comments of we must change our ways. We need to use our hearts and our minds and wallets. I suppose that there is that. That was Jean. And Vicky says, but cleaning up big industry, when they had the money to dirty it up, we can never pay to repair the damage. So there's a wide variety of comments, a wide variety of comments on here. Marcia, let me just give you a couple more. Oh boy, my thing is, I'm getting so many comments here at the end that I can't catch up with it. I wanted to put up Marcia's. It looked good. And Marcia is a great follower of ours. And Marcia says that the polar shift, NASA confirmed this years ago, the reversal of the poles. Why is the impact of that not being discussed? Okay, there's a question, a meaty one we can end with.
The pole shift to which NASA refers is ongoing, and it's not a 90-degree flip of the planet, as is commonly misinterpreted. It's the pole shift is ongoing, in part because of climate change. Think about what happens when you melt all the glaciers. It causes a redistribution of water on the planet and causes magnetic north, to no longer appear in the same place it used to be. And this is a major problem for airports around the world, because what used to be magnetic north is no longer magnetic north. That's the pole shift that has been talking about, and people are adapting to it. Airports are already adapting to it and changing the way that the flight control people talk to the people piloting the airplanes. This is known for a long time, but let's not blow this whole thing out of proportion and say, for example, that because of climate change, we're going into a mini ice age. Let's not say that the poles are going to flop 90 degrees and we're going to have the North Pole be the equator, because that's not what the evidence supports. Okay.
I'm interested in that. That's an interesting, that whole thing is interesting. I've only touched upon it, the poles, the theories. I'm not an expert on it at all. I don't know much about it, but okay. I think we've done really well here. We've got a lot of information. We have so many people making comments, Guy, that we could be on here probably for another whole hour, but I know that you have another interview coming up, and I really want to thank you so very much for coming on Environmental Coffee House. Actually, I would love to host you again. And
let's do that, Sandy.
I would love it. I would love to have that happen, as I am sort of building that kind of channel that we do have really interesting interviews. And I'm sure that we could definitely come up with some more things as time goes on. And I want everybody to go to Nature Bats Last and listen to the podcast and support Guy if you so choose. And I thank you all for coming. Guy, you wait just 1 second. I'm going to end the broadcast because I want to give you a formal goodbye. And everybody, thank you. Environmental Coffee House thanks you. Please share this out because it's a really good interview and it's important. And we got some good things covered today. So, Dr. McPherson, thank you so very much, everyone.
Thank you, Sandy.
I'm going to do my usual, this is me because I'm in 70s, 80s. Peace, guys, and I love you all, and that's my way to get out. We'll talk to you later, everybody. Bye. It's ending. Okay, and